This might genuinely be the best fight in One Piece. Too far? Maybe. But in terms of sheer hype and imagery, it's hard to think of anything that compares. When you look at who's involved, Roger, Garp, and Rocks, more than any blows exchange, this is history itself colliding. This is something we've been waiting to see for years. A confrontation built up since God Valley was ever first whispered about. And now that it's finally here, it more than delivers on every level. You almost feel bad for the people living in the One Piece world, because the majority of them didn't even know that this battle ever happened. The fight itself is as every bit as epic as you would expect, but it also carries a strange sense of tragedy. Even though we already know how it ends, with Rocks losing, Oda makes it impossible to fully accept this fact when you're reading it. Rocks has been portrayed so well throughout this flashback that his fall feels less like justice and more like loss. With each fleeting panel, you can't shake the feeling that you're witnessing the tragic doom of a tragic hero, not the victorious defeat of a villain. I'm not even sure I actually wanted Roger and Garp to win. There's a part of me that clings to the hope that somehow Rocks would have broken free himself and is revealed to have survived somehow, but we all know that's not the case. Garp's words about understanding Rocks' frustration and Roger's tears at the thought of ending his rival, and then the emotionality of that moment hits hard. After years of clashing, trying to beat each other at every violent interaction, but at the same time they don't want to end a rivalry like this, where your greatest opponent isn't even in control of themselves anymore, and the only way to stop them is to strike together, not out of competition but out of necessity. And the close-up shot of Rocks, who once towered over everyone with unmatched willpower, can only cry, as if these tears are his final act of resistance, the last bit of humanity fighting back against the evil consuming him. Roger and Garp didn't want things to go down this way, but they had no other choice. It's just peak cinema, enough to bring tears to your eyes. As for the action itself, Rocks is of course a monster. He was arguably the strongest character in this flashback even before his Domi Reversi form, but that demonic aura and beast-like movement really accentuates his already wild nature. One of the standout exchanges and the craziest part of this whole fight was when Roger and Garp attacked Rocks with Conqueror's Haki-coated blows, and Rocks countered with one of his own, sending both of them flying straight into what looked like a mountain, or maybe what used to be one, because they completely shattered it on impact. This entire exchange ended up splitting the sky. We've seen that iconic imagery before, usually when two equal forces clash, but this time, the difference is that Rocks won that exchange. That single moment showed just how far above Roger and Garp he was in that Domi Reversi form, and I really like how that sets up the ending. In those earlier moments, Roger and Garp both coated their attacks with Conqueror's Haki, but fought separately, while in the final scene, they pour everything together into one combined attack, and that difference completely changes the outcome. These Roger and Garp moments were all so rich. My favorite moment this chapter is the panel when Roger and Garp each hold a Denden Mushi, both telling their respective crews that they will return. It's such a small moment, but the energy in that panel is incredible. Roger and Garp almost look like Ace and Luffy here. Actually, you can see parts of both of them in each of them. Maybe it's just Oda's art style, but that visual connection added another emotional layer for me. I feel a sense of familiarity. And what I love most about the Roger and Garp side of this fight is that there was never a moment where one of them needed saving and the other rushed in to help. It's like Oda is making a point that these two are complete equals who can hold their own. That the person fighting beside them doesn't have to look over their shoulder or worry about their partner falling behind. They can just throw themselves into the chaos without hesitation, trusting that the other one will do the same, and neither has to worry about the other's back. And everything is on instinct. Like that sequence where Rocks lunges with a thrust, Garp dodges at the last second, Roger takes advantage of the opening to send Rocks crashing into a wall, and then Garp immediately grabs him by the legs and slams him into another. It's not planned teamwork, it's this raw, opportunistic, and instinctive chaos where every move flows into the next. And somehow it works because they both understand the rhythm of battle on the same wavelength. There wasn't any grand strategy or coordination, just two forces of nature. It's a rare kind of trust. Two men who understands that the person next to them is just as every bit as unbreakable and powerful as they are. And somehow the fact that these two are not crewmates, but a marine and a pirate forced to fight together makes it even better, because it shows that even two people with opposing ideals can still find that mutual respect in the middle of battle. It really gets you excited about the team-ups we'll probably see Luffy get into in the future, fighting alongside Black Blackbeard, who although is a pirate has a completely different worldview, or alongside Kobe, the marine that has inherited Garp's will. One thing this chapter seemed to prove is that Domi Reversi can actually be overcome with strong enough Conqueror's Haki, which goes back to what Goban was saying in the present timeline when he gave Luffy and Zoro advice about how to truly use their Conqueror's Haki, because it's been hinted that this will be key to defeating the God's Knights and now possibly defeating the giants who were also Domi Reversi'd. And during our live stream there was some discussion as to what this exactly meant, Roger emphasizing that mass is the answer to it all. The most straightforward way to interpret that would be that he's saying put your back into it, because it seemed to be the case that Rox's Conqueror's Haki was just cancelling out that of Roger and Garp's, which is why Roger stressed that there needs to be more mass, there needs to be more energy, there needs to be more Conqueror's Haki from Roger and Garp's side in order to penetrate through Rox's Haki to deal some actual damage. But Roger does note that this will result in knocking all of them out, and it all makes sense in the context of the God Valley battle because we've always known that Rox dies here. But it makes me wonder about the outcome of fighting against Domi Reversi at Elbaf. Is there really no way to reverse the Domi Reversi? Is the only answer that Dory and Broggy must also die? But in terms of what happened in this chapter, the Roger and Garp versus Rox battle definitely lived up to the hype. But there was a lot more to chapter 1165 than just that fight. But before we get into all of that, if you've enjoyed the discussion so far, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate your help in getting to 100,000 subscribers. In return, I'll make sure you don't run out of One Piece discussions. Watching Roger and Garp team up and their whole interaction in this chapter, you cannot convince me that this is the first time that they've done this. And if you want to hear more of my speculative thoughts on Roger and Garp's relationship, then please do watch this video after we finish our discussion here, of course, because I do believe that Roger and Garp were previously best friends. It seems that Rox is finally down and out as we see the Dark Aura leaving his body at the end of the chapter, but this chapter also marks the end of the Rox Pirates, showing us how each of them took their first steps towards becoming the legends we know in the present timeline. Lin Lin telling Kaido that his betrayal is a debt of a lifetime ties directly back to Wano, where she brought up that same line decades later. Kaido seeing it instead as a competition for power gives us an early look at how he would run his future crew, a meritocracy built entirely on strength. The funny part of that exchange is when Lin Lin says, "I'll come to collect that debt one day," and Kaido replies, "I'll throw you right back where you came from," which instantly made me think of that Wano scene when Big Mom tries to climb the waterfall and King kicked her ship away, literally sending her back where she came from. Newgate was also seen meeting a man named Polo, confirmed to be Marco's father, and most likely his first crewmate or original right-hand man. It makes sense when you think about how Whitebeard's crew would be structured later on. The first division commander is usually the closest role to a right-hand position, and Polo likely held that spot before Marco eventually inherited it. I actually mentioned this back in my chapter 1162 discussion video, that mysterious fighter who kicked Silver's axe looked way too much like Marco to be just any random background character. The focus on his silhouette and how he stood out made it clear that Oda wanted us to pay attention. Now, with Polo officially introduced, that small moment makes a lot of sense. This is where Whitebeard begins forming the kind of family that would define him and his crew for the rest of his life. And the fact that Polo isn't a part of our original story, the original present timeline, whereas Marco is, that adds another layer of quiet tragedy and unspoken tragedy. It makes you wonder if that absence ties directly into why Whitebeard has taken on the role of father for his crew. I can easily imagine Marco being born not too long after the events of God Valley, and if Whitebeard somehow felt responsible for Polo's eventual death, it would make sense for him to take Marco in and become that father figure in Polo's place. It fits everything we know about him, a man who lost a comrade and decided that no one under his care would ever be without a family again. And also, let's not forget, Oda naming Marco's dad Polo is hilarious. One of the biggest surprises of this chapter, and the flashback in general doubles as a Marco Polo joke. This reveal ended up being half character lore, half dad joke. Classic Oda. We also see the rest of the now former Rox pirates doing their own thing, but the one that stood out to me this time was Gilbuster. This guy has basically done nothing the entire flashback, but here we finally see him running off with treasure, and what's interesting is that he seems to be accompanied by what looks like one of Perona's negative ghosts. I actually missed this at first because I was too busy laughing at the whole Marco Polo thing, but this is another one of those small Oda details that might be hinting at a previous user of of a familiar devil fruit. We've seen this kind of thing before throughout the flashback. Captain John and Ganzui last chapter were shown respectively possessing Kid and Mr. Five's fruits. What's even more curious is that Gilbastar and Ganzui are both shown together here. The same two who would later appear as zombies on Thriller Bark alongside Captain John. It adds weight to the idea that they might have all died in the same place, maybe even right here on God Valley, especially now that the island structure itself is starting to change because of all the chaos happening. Like the God Valley Island is shifting into something completely different, almost as if this could actually be the beginning of what later becomes Thriller Bark. If that popular theory that God Valley eventually becomes Thriller Bark turns out to be true, then this panel really feels like Oda quietly dropping another piece of evidence. And then amidst all of the destruction, all of the chaos, there is another scene that could be quite easy to miss, but it might actually be one of the most important parts of this chapter. On one of the marine battleships, Dragon is shown pointing a rifle at a higher ranking officer, demanding that they take the surviving civilians on board. What stands out here isn't just that he's threatening a marine superior, it's that he has to. Instead of simply being allowed to save people, he's being forced to use intimidation to do the right thing. That alone may be the moment that really opens his eyes to just how truly broken the system really is. We are witnessing the first spark of the revolutionary spirit we now know Dragon for. The moment he realized that justice inside the Marines isn't always justice at all, and sometimes the only way to make change is through action. Using force here wasn't rebellion just for the sake of it. It was survival, and it's easy to imagine how this would have always stuck with him. It's also a big contrast to his own father's ideology, which we saw a further dive into this chapter. Roger makes a scathing comment about Imu not being very representative of justice at all, which Garp definitely agrees to. But then when Roger invites him to join his crew, Garp refuses, claiming that he has to stay to protect the Marines. I feel like Garp only just very recently managed to refute the Garp is a Navy dog accusation. And this line certainly isn't helping. Dragon protects the civilians, but Garp's focus is on the Marines? I guess naval hero just took on a completely different meaning. Look, I still think that these are all just clues that Garp really is the founder of Sword, which I have discussed if you want a deeper dive into that. And I won't go so far as to question Garp's morality, but this flashback certainly has been an interesting portrayal of Garp's character. Rayleigh and Gaban are also seen going back to look for Roger, and I was actually about to mention that the God Valley flashback feels like it's about to end, but then we still haven't gotten any kind of interaction between Gaban and Summers. And in the present timeline, Summers was clearly terrified when Gaban showed up at Elbaf, like he's genuinely traumatized by him. Yet so far nothing's happened between the two. So I'm still waiting for that scene at God Valley, and honestly, if it's another panel of Summers getting abused by Gaban, or anyone else for that matter really, it's always welcome. We also saw why God Valley ended up being treated like it never existed. Imu, using Saint Saturn's body, ordered the island's complete erasure, all records of the event being wiped out by the Marines and the Cypher Pole, every trace of God Valley gone. But I get the feeling that in the coming chapters, we'll find out what actually happened to the island. Will it be the same kind of destruction we saw with Lucia, or will it finally be revealed that God Valley became Thriller Bark after all? In any case, this chapter was all about the end of an era. The fall of Rox, the breakup of his crew, Dragon's subordination under a corrupt system, and the destruction of God Valley. All of it tying directly into the world we know now. Every legend, every mystery that traces back to this single event. And assuming that this really is the end of the God Valley incident, although we might cover a bit more of it in the next chapter, it's likely that we'll move back to the original Elbaf layer of the flashback, the one involving Shanks, Gaban, Loki, and the truth about the death of King Harold, before fully returning to the present timeline. But after seeing the full picture of the incident now, God Valley really lived up to the hype. We got to see legends clashing, factions breaking and forming, Easter eggs everywhere, and the first steps of so many relevant characters towards who they are today. But what do you think? Let me know your thoughts on the God Valley flashback, all the hype things we saw in this chapter and beyond, your favorite moments, your favorite characters. Let me know by leaving a comment below. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please like the video, share the video, and please do subscribe to help out a fellow One Piece fan get to 100,000 subscribers. You can also help support the channel further by becoming a Patreon or channel member like these wonderful people. But as always, thank you for listening to another one of my crazy One Piece ramblings. This is JoyGirl, and I'll see you again soon.